All right, so I'm going to do two things tonight. The first is to tell you about the workshops I'm hosting for election season alongside Tom McMahon. I don't know where he went, but he's here somewhere. The Yes We Can movement is aimed at bringing hope back to North Georgia. Politics in a red area when we're surrounded by cynicism and doubt can feel hopeless. So the goal is to connect like-minded people across this part of the state and give them the tools necessary to believe again. We're going to be rethinking this area and standing together so when faced with cynicism and doubt, we're able to respond, yes, we can. I've got 7 of those workshops happening from now to November on Zoom. So the next one is Monday, and if you'd like to go to that, there's a sign-up sheet on each of your tables with a list of dates attached. Please leave me your name, email, and a date that works, and please do join us. Also, if you're interested in funding a workshop, I'm still missing funds for just a couple of those. So if you're interested, please come find me. I will be eternally grateful to you. And then second, I'm going to tell you a story. So it's 2008. I'm 14 and my brother's 11, and we are these 2 little homeschooled kids running around the Whitfield County Democratic Committee headquarters, where our mom ran phone banks for Obama in 2008. And I learned canvassing, I learned phone banking. I went with my mom to an Obama training camp in Atlanta. If you've done phone banking in the past 10 years, we don't do this anymore, but this thing was 12 hours. It was in person, and we learned to make calls, to talk to voters, and get people excited about this cool senator from Illinois. And there was so much excitement during this campaign. One of the guys at this camp bet all of us that nobody could make more phone calls than him, and if someone did, he would eat a raw onion, which he then held up and showed us. And this guy in the back, this older gentleman, he's madly punching in phone numbers. And I have no idea how many phone calls that man made, but Onion Man ate his onion. And we watched it happen. So we came back from Atlanta, and I'm too young to actually make phone calls at that point, but I trained the new phone bankers who come in. And all through 2008, I watched this impossible candidate become the most unlikely president in the history of the United States. 2008 taught me what it takes to win a race. So in 2020, I became a volunteer leader for the Democratic Party of Georgia, and then after the runoffs, I got into local politics. And I'm now the volunteer coordinating committee chair for the Whitfield County Democratic Committee. I've given workshops for the Democratic Party of Georgia, North Georgia Democrats, Whitfield, Paulding, Dade County, and I've become a political consultant. And I've spent the past year and a half looking at this area, looking at North Georgia, and trying to figure out a strategy that works up here. Because the state is trying to run a campaign here like you would in Midtown Atlanta. This is not Midtown Atlanta, right? So part of it is rethinking the voters that you have to work with up here, but the other more important part is when we look at these conservative numbers up here, we need to turn that lost cause mentality into yes we can, like we did in 2008. And I'm trying to bring what I call capital H hope back to this area, because it's not just making phone calls. You gotta have the belief that those calls can make a difference. That's what we had back in 2008. And that's the part that I was missing for about 12 years. Because all that I just told you, training phone bankers in 2008 and working in 2020, I didn't do any election work in 2012 or 2016 or the 2018 midterms and for most of 2020. I voted, but that wasn't enough. And it took 12 years to bring myself to be able to do election work again. And I'm going to tell you that side of the story because Kathleen in 2020 needed a lot more than some girl on a stage telling her to be more hopeful. So I'm going to rewind all the way back to 2008 and do this again. Barack Obama ran on hope. Not the kind of hope where, we think about, I hope that tomorrow is better. He ran on the type of hope that civil rights and voting rights leaders talk about. John Lewis said, when you have hope, you hold on to something so powerful, it almost wills it to happen. There's a sanctity to hope when these people use the word. And we were so hopeful back in 2008, betting each other onions, that we could make more phone calls than the other person. And this cool, young, inspiring presidential candidate has us believing in a brighter future, and then we elect Obama, and we have that brighter future. And people who'd never voted, never done election work, never paid attention to politics worked on that campaign. There was so much hope in 2008, and it came in the form of voting and phone banking and canvassing and standing up. Obama was reelected in 2012, and in 2016, it felt like we'd win again because America had changed, right? And to watch the election returns, I had come home from college to watch them with my parents, and I'd grown up watching those election returns kind of fall on the right side of history. And I just expected it. You know, we all did. And the longer I watched the elections results come in, the more nervous I got, and I'm a very superstitious person. So finally I figured, you know what, if I stop watching it, it'll be fine. So I go to bed, wake up the next morning, get out of bed, sit on the floor of my room before I turn the lights on or anything, and I check the news. And I just sat there in the dark with my mouth open for about 15 minutes until my screen went black. America had become this place not defined by Obama, but by this really terrible, hateful person. And it is really hard when you feel hopeless to have the courage to do this work. Georgia at that point had not flipped in my lifetime. I was in a red county, in a red district, in a red state, in the deep South. My uterus is more regulated than an assault rifle. And then you put a pandemic on top of it. And when the whole deck is stacked against you, and then you get in the race, and then you lose, it's a whole lot worse than if you just stayed on the sidelines. And that's what I told myself. Every time I had the opportunity to volunteer, I ignored the phone calls, the texts, the invites to phone bank and canvas. I told other people how to do election work, and I voted. But I knew that wasn't enough because I grew up on the 2008 campaign. But I just couldn't do it. And the morning after the 2016 election, that open-mouthed shock for me didn't come from, I can't believe this happened. It came from the feeling of, what if I had done more? But I just couldn't do it. And that's where I was until July of 2020. That's when John Lewis died. And John Lewis, to me, had been this legend, this larger-than-life superhero of American politics. He marched with Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke at the March on Washington when he was a lot younger than I am right now. He had his skull cracked open, marching for the right to vote, and then he got back up, bloody bandages around his head, and he kept marching for 60 miles from Selma to Montgomery. John Lewis was built different. And so I'm watching the funeral of a superhero, thinking, how can we possibly make change without John Lewis to lead us? And I was just really confused because Barack Obama's not giving a eulogy for a superhero. He's telling me about this very ordinary, kind of short person. And the short thing really resonated because I am standing on a stool behind this podium. And Obama said John Lewis never believed he was doing anything more than what any of us is capable of. And you know, it's really easy to forget when you see people like John Lewis and Martin Luther King and Diane Nash and Polly Murray and Stacey Abrams and Obama. But this isn't the movies. We don't have inhuman superheroes. We just have people. And no one that you ever meet is any more or less human than you or me. And Obama said, what a radical idea. What a revolutionary notion, this idea that any of us ordinary people, a young kid from Troy, Alabama, can stand up to the powers and principalities and say no. This isn't right. This isn't true. This isn't just. He said America was built by John Lewis's. America was built by ordinary people. And while I am sitting there watching this speech, I pop open my laptop and I sign up for my first phone bank, and I rope my brother into doing it with me, and we make phone calls for the first time in our lives because we remembered what it took in 2008. We remembered that it wasn't the larger-than-life figures that made 2008 happen. It wasn't Barack Obama. It was all the people who believed in him. It was all the people inside the movement that he was leading, the people at the Whitfield County Democratic Committee headquarters, and the people in that little office space in Atlanta betting each other onions and cold calling strangers, all those people who had hope. They were the superheroes. And when John Lewis marched, that famous picture of him marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in the pale coat and the book bag, it was the people behind him. All those people who marched from Selma to Montgomery, whose names we don't remember. Those are the people that changed history. Because without them, John Lewis would just be a man on a bridge. Without the movement, Barack Obama would just be a senator from Illinois. It's the movement of ordinary people like you and me. Those are the people that built America. The dreamers who dared to take a chance on a future the whole world insisted was impossible. Flipping Georgia was impossible. Republicans and Democrats told me that until we stood up and we did it. I waited 12 years for a superhero like John Lewis to make that change, and in the end, it was a bunch of nobodies, just like me, who got tired of waiting and stood up and started marching. We flipped this state 3 times because we stopped waiting for someone to come do it for us. So I don't want you to hope for change in North Georgia. I want you to have capital H hope, the belief in yourself and to be able to create change in whatever small or large way that you can. I want you to stand up and start marching. I want each of you to be a John Lewis of your own, because you, the people in this room, are the superheroes that you keep waiting for. So before I leave you, hopefully to sign up for one of those workshops I'll be hosting, and sign-up sheets are on the table, I want you to look at your hands. Like, actually look at your hands. And I want you to see in those hands the hope that Barack Obama keeps telling us to hold on to. The tenacity and perseverance to follow our goals, and the belief in our own abilities. Capital H hope. Now look at your feet. And in them, remember Abraham Joshua Heschel, a rabbi who marched alongside Dr. King and said when he marched, he felt like his legs were praying. Hear your voice and recognize in it John Lewis and the will to make change come. These are the things that make each of you a John Lewis. And all I ask is that you stop waiting like I was waiting and use them. Because the only way this happens is if you and you and you use those hands and those feet and those voices and stand up and speak out and march forward to get in the most necessary of trouble. If we can do that, then we can absolutely do what we have been told is impossible and show this country what we're made of, even here in North Georgia. It's our turn to get in good trouble.